Michigan Football Memories is a co-production of Michigan Television and HKO Media.
Isn't this what college football's all about? That's why you're where you are, I'm where I am, and aren't you just loving the devil out of it? God darn it, this is great.
I played 13 years in National Football League, nothing. You come to close to what that game was.
You know, it's been passed on from generation to generation to generation.
I had read an interview by Keith Jackson that if you want to feel tradition, if you want a sense of what tradition is, he said some Friday night in the fall, take a walk down to Michigan Stadium and stand out on that field and look up, and you can feel the history, you can feel the ghost of all those great players that have played there.
Welcome to Michigan Stadium. Have a good game.
Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome to another afternoon of Michigan football. It's a beautiful day in Ann Arbor. Frank Beckman here, along with Jim Brandstetter. Great to have you along with us.
Here we go. Here we go.
Hey, how do you intimidate? How do you intimidate? Man. Play fast and you hit. Play fast and you hit. That's how you intimidate. Yes, sir. All right? Let's go, baby. DB's on 3. 1, 2, 3. DB!
For the University of Michigan and the hundreds of thousands of fans who flood the small college town of Ann Arbor, Michigan for 7 Saturdays every fall, football is more than a game. As the late Bob Ufer once said, Michigan football is a religion, and Saturday is the holy day of obligation. And for more than 75 years, the Michigan faithful have paid their respects in that open-air cathedral known as the Big House.
There's nothing in the world like Michigan Stadium. And growing up in Detroit, where football from a high school level wasn't that great, and you only had 100 people out watching your games, and then coming to play here, I mean, it just blows you away.
People put their lives into this building. Yost, Oosterbaan, Chrysler, they were all tied inexorably with this building and this stadium because of what happened here with their teams.
We forget now the guys like that were the real true innovators and the creative guys who got this whole machine and tradition really rolling.
Fielding H. Yost was an innovator. He built Michigan. He started the tradition.
Fielding Yost was so far ahead of his time, and his ego matched the size of that building. And only he could have conceived of doing something quite that big in a town this small.
He had a phenomenal record. He had the point-a-minute teams, and he was the guy who had the great foresight and was by far the most important coach to have been here.
He was Bo before Bo and Cannon before Cannon. His 20 years as coach were as good a run as any college coach ever.
When Fielding H. Yost boarded a train in Palo Alto, California for Ann Arbor in 1901, he had no idea it would become a one-way trip that would last 45 years. At the turn of the century, the University of Michigan was beginning to take college football seriously. Yost was offered free room and board and $2,300 a year, the salary of a full professor, to turn around what was then a fledgling Michigan football team. The brash young coach set about building not just a team, but a program, and in doing so brought a vagabond sport still starving for attention into the 20th century.
When Yost came here, football was more analogous to what we call rugby than it is to the game we recognize today. It was still the British model of sports where honor and decorum went before competitiveness.
Back in his day, they couldn't throw the ball. The ball was damn near round.
So you had the drop kick, you had the kick for extra points, the field goals, the place kicking, the punting. It was kind of like a checker game.
And Yost violated all that. He played the game clean, by all accounts, and coached it clean. But he was all about himself and wanted this thing to be as big as it possibly could be.
By the end of Yost's first season in 1901, Michigan had shut out every opponent, scoring an inconceivable 550 points in the process. But the highlight was undoubtedly the very last game of that year. Invited to Pasadena for a football game the city had decided was the perfect addition to their Tournament of Roses on New Year's Day, Yost's Wolverines met his former team from Stanford and routed them. With 8 minutes left and the score 49-0, Stanford's captain walked over to the Michigan bench and offered his surrender. The game was so lopsided, the tournament would not host another for 16 years. Led by Willie Heston, Germany Schultz, and Neil Snow, three of Michigan's original All-Americans, the Wolverines won 43 games and ran up a record 2,346 points to a mere 42 over the next 4 years. In 1903, against their roughest opponent, Minnesota, Yost also unknowingly sparked one of football's great traditions.
The little brown jug, they had that as their water jug up there, and after the game they had left it there, and they asked for it back from the Minnesota people, and they said the only way to get it back is to win it back. And so it just started that way. It's got its own case and gets a score painted on it each year, and that's the way it goes.
By 1905, 4 consecutive national championships had made the University of Michigan college football's first dynasty, and Yost was its king. Where others saw a sport that was synonymous with brutality and lacked any serious potential, Yost saw it as a means to shape young lives.
The one thing that I recall from Fielding H. Yost is a sign, a placard we had in the locker room about what the mind can conceive and believe the body will achieve, and how he took an average kid and made him a great player because of the things he taught them. He saw the value, and not just in the game, but in that person's life, and that people would respect that.
Yost was the guy who said, this sport properly coached builds character. We've heard this 100 million times. Who does not say this anymore? Yost was the first guy to say this, and this has to be stressed. He was the first guy who said and believed, this makes you better, not worse, as a human being. In 1901, that was new.
In the point-a-minute teams, Fielding Yost was a defensive-minded coach. He was not an offensive coach. He wasn't a guy who thought up all kinds of offensive ways to fool the opponent and all of those things. He played defense, and he scored a point a minute by being so good defensively, the other team just couldn't move.
Yost was an unbelievable innovator on the field. He invented the no-huddle offense, which we still see today. He invented the quick kick, and he was a big proponent early on of the forward pass. Until then, the forward pass was a desperation thing, was an anomaly, a novelty. In college football, the pass opens it up to small, quick, smart guys and smarter coaches.
Fielding Yost's mastery of this new invention resulted in his best team. In his last years as head coach, two gifted players who shared the same name made Michigan the most feared opponent in football. The passing-receiving combination of Benny Friedman to Benny Oosterbaan became legendary, a part of the new, more graceful football.
And that probably was the first time that Michigan really utilized the pass. Benny Friedman was a talented guy, but Benny Oosterbaan would say, "Benny, just throw the ball close, I'll catch it," see?
And Benny DeBenny showed the whole country this could be done. And after that, the game also became much more popular for this reason, because people love watching the forward pass.
The scope of Yost's vision transcended the gridiron. When he stepped down from coaching to become athletic director in 1926, most of the Michigan athletic facilities, including the stadium at Ferry Field, were rickety wooden structures that couldn't contain the numbers that Yost's program was drawing. Most other new university stadiums seated 70,000, and Yost demanded that his great team have a home to match the size of its success. But nobody could have expected quite what he had in mind.
Everybody said that he was crazy to think that there'd be a stadium for 130,000.
This is before interstate highways. This is before national TV or any TV at all.
In 1927, to build a stadium, and then to say, I'm going to put foundations in there big enough so that I can put 130 in there. It was nuts. They got to think he's crazy. I mean, first of all, how did they get here? I mean, everybody in Ann Arbor wasn't going to come to these games. So if you're next to Detroit, which is a metropolitan area, sure, but how are they going to get here? It's somewhere in Fielding H. Yost's imagination thought, which makes him truly remarkable. He knew that somewhere down the road this would happen. There's a quote in a book that Fielding Yost had written. He says, "No man can be a football player who does not love the game. Half-heartedness, lack of earnestness will eliminate any man from a football team. His love for the game must be genuine. It is not devotion to a fad that makes men play football. It is because they enjoy their struggle."
In my judgment, the accomplishments of Fielding Yost would overshadow those of Rockne, because Fielding did it over a long period of time and did other things besides just coaching. I don't think anybody out there, from Stagg to Warner, any of them, was any better than Fielding Yost.
Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the 235-member Michigan Marching Band. Band, take the field.
You can't talk about the tradition of Michigan football without talking about the tradition of the Michigan band, because the band has a lot to do with our success in football.
Founded by a small group of male students in 1898, the Michigan Marching Band has provided the soundtrack to Michigan football for over a century. Without space or sponsor upon their inception, the band found its visionary in William D. Ravelli, a passionate man who would, for 36 years, starting in 1935, recruit musicians with the fervor of a head football coach. By aligning the band with the School of Music, It was Ravelli who ensured that the band would be a lasting game day tradition.
Ravelli started all this stuff back in the 40s. You know, they used to have a marching band that just went boop, 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 and all of a sudden he started going boop, 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 boop. He was a tough guy. When he had people out and he was drilling them and marching and playing that, you know, playing the victors, and that's why it's become such a phenomenal fight song in university annals.
To think that a guy coming back from Chicago on a train after watching Michigan beat the University of Chicago named Louis Elbel on a train wrote this like on a napkin, it's amazing.
All the greens and blue faithful join in a rousing chorus of the Victors.
Ravelli once talked to us at a luncheon, and he said, when they play the victors and they say, "Hail to the victors," he said, throw that fist out there. Don't just perfunctorily do this. Throw that fist out there when you say hail. And man, I do. I am in the stands and I throw that fist out and I tell all those around me, that's the way to cheer Michigan on.
Hail to the victors valiant, hail to the conquering heroes, hail, hail to Michigan, champions of the West. Go Blue.
People know that song. I love it.
Not a whole lot of talking goes on down the tunnel. Everybody's getting psyched up, and basically you're marching down to go to battle.
It's probably the only stadium where there's only one way in and out as far as the player coach is concerned, and it's down that tunnel.
You know there are a lot of people out there. You can't see them real well because there are a lot of players in front of you.
You don't hear it, you feel it. Sounds like rain going on out there, but it's the fans, and they're going nuts. And all of a sudden there's this rush of let's go. And there's this push, and you can't fight it. You got to go with it.
And that whole stadium just engulfs you. To the last game that I coached, it was an emotional experience for me. As many times as I've gone down that tunnel to go into that great crowd and get ready to play a game here.
I never knew anything about Michigan until I saw him in the '64 Rose Bowl. I was a little kid at the time. And obviously, you know, when you see that Michigan helmet with the wings, you know, you say, wow, that's pretty unusual.
It's definitely one of the most unique helmets in football. You know, everybody knows the helmet.
People know when they see that helmet, where it's from, who it belongs to. When you see that wing and helmet, you know it's a place of pride, tradition, and toughness.
The helmet's the reason why I came here. I mean, being 8 years old in Air, Massachusetts, seeing those helmets, some people hate them. I fell in love with them.
those lines, the whole thing. Those helmets are something else. I mean, it's Michigan.
I had the opportunity to wear the first winged headgear at Michigan. The leather headgear that we wore at that time usually was painted white on the across this way and across that way, black and white. And when we got the winged headgear, quite a difference.
In 1938, a tall, distinguished man bearing more of a resemblance to a professor than a football coach arrived in Ann Arbor. Nicknamed Fritz while a player at the University of Chicago under the legendary Amos Alonzo Stagg, Herbert O. Chrysler developed a clinical obsession for the game, fascinated by its most minute details.
What Chrysler was going nuts about, his quarterbacks could not identify their receivers downfield. Everyone had the same black leather helmet, and therefore you couldn't tell from heads alone who was who.
They wanted to distinguish the backs and the flankers and the ends, so they put that wing on them so that they could distinguish the two.
It was something different. Nobody else had stuff like that in those days. And you see, that was a big thing about Fritz. Even with his game plans and so on, he came up with numerous things that nobody had ever thought of before. And they always seemed to work for him.
You know, he's the founder of two-platoon football. The 2-point after a touchdown is Fritz Chrysler. Half of the NCAA rule book on recruiting was written by Fritz Chrysler.
Fritz Chrysler's inspirations and innovations became the banner by which he led his teams into battle year in and year out. Over the course of his 10-year run as head coach, Michigan would become a yearly presence in the national polls, earning him respect both in the stands and the locker room.
He was the best coach that I was ever associated with, and not only as a player, but when I was coaching at Michigan.
He was always dressed in a suit coat, always.
He looked very distinguished, looked like he was a businessman going to the bank or going to the stock market or wherever it was. And he acted that way too.
He used to say that if you're going to win the ball game, you're going to have to play better than you know how. That was a favorite line of his. And we all believed that. And we did play better than we knew how.
Playing for Fritz Chrysler was just a marvel, and you can't say you worship the guy, but I think the guys in the team almost felt that way, that everything he said meant something.
Fritz Chrysler always used to say that at halftime, no matter if you were leading by 30-0, he would say, "What's the score?" And you were to say 0-0. He said, remember that. The score is always 0-0 when you start the second half.
For all of his insight, Fritz Chrysler still relied on his players to carry his vision onto the field, and none did this better than Michigan's first Heisman Trophy winner, Ole 98.
Tom Harmon was the best football player I ever saw.
Tom was always my idol. I thought that, boy, if I could just play like he could.
He kicked off, punted, passed, did it all.
Sitting on the bench watching him play, you knew anytime he had that ball, it was a possible touchdown.
Offense, defense, kick, throw. Back in the old days of the single wing where you had to have that multi-purpose guy back there to do all that. And Harmon was great at it.
And that's when Fritz also came up with one of his ideas.
You got that one picture of him where half his jersey ripped off?
Most of the jersey in those days was hard to tear, so he saw to it that the ones that Tommy Harmon was wearing were rippable, if that's the word.
And if they grabbed the sleeve on Tom, baby, that baby would rip right off and he'd still be going.
In his last game as a Wolverine, in front of a crowd of Ohio State faithful in Columbus, Ohio, Harmon almost single-handedly defeated the Buckeyes on their own turf. In 60 minutes of play, Harmon passed for 151 yards and 2 touchdowns, rushed for 139 yards and 2 touchdowns, averaged 50 yards a punt, scored 4 extra points, and intercepted 3 passes, 1 for a 5th touchdown. When he left the field that day, 73,000 Buckeye fans rose to their feet for a standing ovation.
He was probably the athlete that Chrysler was the closest to. He would talk about Harmon a lot with me, and of course Harmon regarded him as almost like a father. So it was a great relationship.
Harmon's football heroics were unmatched for their time, but it was his bravery off the field that gained attention as well. World War II wreaked havoc on the normalcy of life on campus and on the playing field, as players were drafted on a moment's notice, often in the middle of the season. Harmon himself was shot down and walked to safety. By 1946, the need to try and pick up where life had left off saw an incredible swell of talent on the Michigan Stadium sidelines.
They talked about that football team of ours, and they said that the backfield was made up of mad magicians. They could hide the football. They hid it from the coaches. Coaches couldn't find it a lot of times.
Chappius and Weesey in the single wing to the right. I remember hearing that on the radio. They were the mad magicians, and they, they were back in the days of the spinner and all that fancy reverse coming off the wing, Bump Elliott coming off the wing, and nobody could stop those teams.
In 1947, we went undefeated. We went to the Rose Bowl.
That Rose Bowl game was a thrill because we were playing that far away from home. We had taken 3 days on the train to get out there.
And the press was just unmerciful on Michigan. I mean, they were trying to build them up because they wanted us to get wiped out, really what they wanted to do. And before the game, Fritz told the boys, he says, these sports writers out here are trying to slap you in the face. Go out and do what you got to do.
With players who ranged in age from 17 to 31, Michigan's offensive and defensive sleight of hand stunned the USC Trojans 49-0 in the Rose Bowl. 46 years after Fielding H. Yost's squad trounced Stanford by the same score, the Wolverines' astonishing victory earned them the 1947 national title.
Chappius took the ball like a shortstop would to a second baseman on a double play and threw it to the right halfback going around. We started the game with that play, and everything worked. When you go 49-0, why, everything must work pretty well.
While the Wolverines would go on to win a second consecutive national championship in 1948, they would do so without the man so many of them had revered, but who few had ever gotten close to.
He had told me one time he had 3 friends, thousands of acquaintances, but only 3 friends.
He was not our best friend. Benny Oosterbaan was our best friend, and we had fun with him, but not so with Coach Chrysler.
We have had a reunion every 5 years since we finished our program in 1948-47
We were having our reunion, and he had been in the hospital. And he got up out of his hospital bed to come and join us in our reunion. And he got up to speak, and he was very ill.
And Fritz told us that the reason that he retired as coach was because any team that he would have coached after the 47 season, none of them could rise to that excellence he felt.
And so after that reunion, he wrote us all a letter. He started out by saying there are times when your heart is so full that it makes speaking very difficult.
As we travel down the weary path of life through the garden of our memories, Chrysler wrote, no doubt the echoes of yesteryear's cheers will become dim. But the emotional experiences of joy and elation, heartaches and disappointments can never be shared by others. These friendships, through sunshine and shadows, will stand forever as a brilliant beacon high in the halls of our memories, framed in majestic reverence. May good fortune always smile on you and yours. Your old coach, with abiding affection, Fritz Chrysler.
If you're a Michigan fan, you're a Michigan fan for life. It's not a 6 or 7 year deal.
Well, I think, some people get carried away with Michigan football. It does show how important the football program here is to so many people, because it's through the football program that they identify themselves with Michigan.
I took a picture at the game Saturday of a father with 3 kids. The kids had everything on. They had a block M and they had rings with M's on them and everything else. I didn't tell them that I had started all that, but I took a picture of them because I get a kick out of it.
Don Canham brought Michigan football from the dark ages into the new 20th century.
We had vision to have 100,000 people every Saturday during the fall when Michigan played at home.
In 1968, too many seats in Michigan Stadium were empty. Many of the athletic buildings on campus were badly in need of repair, and the department was $250,000 in the red. New athletic director Donald B. Canham knew he had to fill every seat in the stadium, but it would take more than a football team to accomplish it.
My father, broadcasting in the 60s, he used to talk about being able to shoot a cannon down through either end zone and he wouldn't kill anybody. There was nobody there.
When I first came here in 1968, we had 100,000 with August, 100,000 with Michigan State, Ohio State. But 100,000 people every game in, game out, that wasn't happening.
Your first job was to fill the place. Fill it with anybody, including 10-year-old kids. Your parent drops you off for $5, $2 for the ticket, a hot dog, Coke, and one of the little plastic footballs, which we threw around in the stadium because there's still room to do that in 1973 and 74.
We found that as soon as you had a sellout, the ticket demand increased tremendously. So we wanted to create the impression that we had a sellout. So we had dollar high school tickets, and then we'd invite 35 bands.
12,000 high school bandsmen show their stuff.
Band Day, genius. High school bands come in, why? To fill the stadium and make it colorful.
Bringing in the bands, and sending out letters to every home in the state. Oh, yes.
We had the alumni list in the 5-state area. Then we bought high-income people who had bought a car from Polk in Detroit. For instance, we figured, guy's got a new car. Gee, you got enough money? You'd like to drive a new car to the game? Sports Illustrated said our ticket application looked like a promotion for a Florida land development, which is exactly what we wanted.
But the tickets Canham was selling were cheap. He needed another trick up his sleeve, a way to bring the athletic department into the black that wouldn't be restricted to a handful of Saturdays in the fall.
Canham noticed walking around town that all these kids are wearing Detroit Lions t-shirts, Detroit Tigers t-shirts, this kind of stuff. And he thought, we've got a popular product here. Why not sell Michigan paraphernalia to everyone else?
We designed most of the insignia that you see on things now. We designed those things at my kitchen table.
And he quickly started marketing with the tickets. Here's a coffee mug. Would you like to buy a Michigan coffee mug?
We would sell the coffee cups and the ashtrays in our ticket mailings. And we found out that we had a business going.
Drawn in by Don Canham's marketing genius, potential fans began traveling from far and wide to spend a Saturday in Ann Arbor. But in a volatile sport like football, where winning is never guaranteed, Canham made sure that while the game would bring fans in, the experience outside the stadium would bring them back year after year.
So we said, now, okay, our philosophy, we have to have this a fun day.
He made coming to a football game at Michigan a happening. You come early in the morning and you go home at dark.
And he sells it to the moms. He sells it to the wives. He figures this one out. The wives figure out what you're doing on the weekends, not the dads.
All of our advertising was pitched to the lady of the household. She controls the weekend. She goes to her husband and says, look, you played golf all week, we're taking the kids to the zoo today. So we wanted her to say, we're taking the kids to Ann Arbor today.
And he was smart enough to know that as you bring a kid here at 8 or 9 years old to run around the parking lot, throw the football around and be a part of Michigan and understand and see what Michigan is all about, those kids ultimately will become students. And how do you get them their first look at it? What better way than to come to a football game and experience the kind of joy, the kind of friendship that you do at a tailgate outside a Michigan football game.
Hi, my name is Sheila McKay, and I'm here waiting to go into the Notre Dame game today because it will be my, thank God, 373rd consecutive game, home and away. I haven't missed a game since 1972.
I haven't missed one here since 1950. If I live to be 100, I will have seen over half of the game they've played in their history. It doesn't matter where the game is or what, as long as they both fight like hell.
Whoa, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, that's better. I'm Father Tom Firestone, pastor here at St. Mary's Student Parish, serving the University of Michigan. Sad to say, I was brought up with 2 languages in my family, English and foul, and at the stadium, the second language starts coming out. And I start yelling, and I'm screaming, and I'm angry with the refs because they can't tell a tackle from a block, and all these kinds of things are going on. And end of the game, I'm hoarse. I can't talk. I've just lost my voice. So every Sunday this was happening, I was starting to really have some real serious problems with my voice on Sundays. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm still too much in the throat there. It's got to be more in the lungs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Basically, when I'm in the car or something, I'll practice those voice lessons, and I make sure I'm very hydrated before I go to the game, so I'm ready for whatever happens, and I just try to be a little more concentrating on being a fan that is knowledgeable in the use of boisterous dexterity.
Well, I've never been to a tailgate at Michigan Stadium. Someday I look forward to experiencing that.
It has become the place to be where people become friends. You go meet your buddies from the tailgate who you never see the rest of the year, and yet you're still able to share stories about your kids, your grandkids. People who have tailgated next to each other bring their babies. Those babies are now cooking the food for mom and dad. And that has become part of what the fabric, I think, of Michigan football and the whole afternoon is about on a Saturday.
I'm Helen Govan. I'm grandma of the golf course. I've been coming to these games since 1936. And this golf course was nothing but a cornfield. And the road out there was just nothing but stones. And I came here to the games in a rumble seat.
I think the first time I was probably 5 years old. And I guess I got hooked right then and there. The majesty, the magnificence of this whole thing.
University of Michigan football is my identity. When I put on the maize and blue, or I sign my little block M because that's my signature, people know what I stand for. And I stand for being blue and maize and blue and maize. It's great to be a Michigan Wolverine. It is. Yes.
I got a picture of Bo right over my bed, you know. And you know what? When we went to Colorado, my grandson, his son, he had his picture taken with Bo because we rode back on the plane with Bo. And when we were getting our luggage, Michael says to Bo, he says, you know, you sleep with my grandmother every night. Bo said, well, I do. And he says, do we have fun? Max said, if you're with my grandma, you have fun. And we have fun.
On Saturday morning, I get up and get my game clothes on and take the same road in, same stop signs, same everything, because I'm really superstitious. Then we have our tailgate, and after the tailgate, we leave an hour and 10 minutes before the game.
Hi, Sheila. How are you?
Give my ticket to the same ticket taker, who I've given it to for years and years and years. And then go through, and I touch Roger's tailgate's brick, and I touch my brick. And my brick says my name, Sheila I. McKay, and it says 384, 11, because I sit in section 3, row 84, seat 11, and it says almost heaven because 4 more rows you're out of the stadium.
$50 dozen bagels. 200 pieces each of fried chicken and regular chicken, and then we have Novalox and corned beef and roast beef and tuna and salami and turkey, and then that's the same every week. But now we get to the gourmet stuff, which Mel does. Mel's our gourmet man.
One of my hobbies is cooking, and I change the menu for every game. Today we have a Tuscan vegetable soup. So it's a northern Italian vegetable soup made with cannelli beans and lots and lots of different vegetables that I make. I made this on Wednesday, chilled it until this morning, and then reheated it. And the second item here is linguine with clams, and this was made yesterday, and again chilled and then reheated at 4 o'clock this morning to start reheating it. And then the third item I made for this game are crab cakes. And the crab cakes actually I made in the middle of the week, but didn't cook them until, again, 4 o'clock this morning. I get up real early and start cooking the stuff, then get up to Ann Arbor and put everything in chafing dishes and heat it now so that our guests and customers will be well satisfied.
What customers? You've been taking money on the side I don't know about?
Well,
no customers.
Customers don't always have to pay. In our case, no one has ever paid anything. No one pays anything. Ira Jaffe, my partner, and I have been tailgating independent of one another, and a lot of the guests were friends of ours mutually. So we were entertaining the same people. Then one year, the two of us sat down and said, why do we do this? Why don't we put a tailgate together? And it grew and grew to 100, 200, and now we're going to see 500, maybe more today.
But I think I do it because I love life and I love people. The football game is kind of sentimental to me because my dad died when I was 19, and that was, you know, my memories of him in good times. But it's happiness. It's good people, you know. The hugs and the sun and the nice people. We'll go to a wedding and a student will come up and say, you don't know me, Mr. Jaffe, but you fed me for 4 years, you know, and you made my Saturday. And that's what it's all worth. It makes it all worth it.
Canham knew that he had to sell coffee mugs. He knew he had to sell the tickets. But he also knew without a coach to do that, he's got no chance.
He knew he had a large stadium and he had to pack the house in order for his athletic department to be prosperous. And he went in and got the general to come and do the job.
My dad was a fireman in Barberton, Ohio, and we used to go on vacation in the Upper Peninsula and fish. We'd drive our little old Ford. I remember we had a 39 Ford, drove it up there. And we were coming back once, and I talked my dad into coming through Ann Arbor. And when I came through Ann Arbor, we parked right out here at the gate. And lo and behold, the Michigan team was walking out to the field, which is now where the indoor facility is. That's where they practiced. And sure enough, I saw Fritz Chrysler, and I remember distinctly Lenny Ford. He was a big end that played at that time. And I stood there and watched him, you know. And I was, at that time, I was probably 13, 14, 15, something like that.
In December of 1968, Don Canham was looking for a new coach to lead Michigan into its next era. What he would find was a fiery and unyielding man who had grown up idolizing the very men he would follow.
I tried to hire Joe Paterno, and I thought Joe would take it. I knew Joe from a previous situation, and he turned it down, and I had never met Schembechler, but George Allen, who was a roommate of mine at one time, mentioned Schembechler.
When he took the job, there wasn't even a coat hanger in the locker room. They hung up their clothes on a nail.
And I'll hear my coaches would say, man, we had better facilities than this at Miami. And I said, wait a minute. At Miami, you didn't have a spike where Fielding H. Yost hung his gear when he coached here. You don't have that tradition there. Doesn't make any difference what kind of facilities you have. You don't have that down there.
By the summer of 1969, Glenn E. Bo Schembechler was enforcing a program not unlike military boot camp on a team that practiced only blocks away from one of the centers of counterculture and political protest in America.
Somebody once asked me, and they said, you know, was he really tough? And I said, I want you to picture yourself standing on top of a well, and then you just jump in with your eyes closed, and you start to fall, and all of a sudden you just feel all kinds of barbed wire cutting at you and knives, you know, ripping you up, and then all of a sudden you just, bam, you hit the ground. I said, and that's just getting from the locker room to the field.
When he came in here, he put a sign up, said, those who stay will be champions. And after that first spring practice, we had guys quitting every day. Somebody had written in magic marker underneath that sign, those who stay will be champions. Those who don't will be doctors, lawyers, and other important people.
Any questions? It's all about commitment. If you're going to play football and you're going to play tough football, where you want to be the most physical team out there, you have to make a commitment because you have to practice that way. Now, if you don't practice that tough, you're not going to be tough.
Bo's main objective was to win. And of course, his first year, he goes out and he beats Ohio State.
They were primed for an upset. Everybody said, oh, they ought to be playing in the NFL. They could beat the Minnesota Vikings.
Keep in mind that the year before, Michigan had a very fine football team. And they went down to Ohio State, and Ohio State beat them 50-14.
And it was bad enough that we were being beat by Ohio, but they went for two. The score was already 48-14. And they got to 2. They scored 2. And the final score ended up being 50-14. And they asked Woody, why did you go for 2 when you knew you had the game won? And he said, because I couldn't go for 3. It's on, Holmes. It's on.
We wanted Ohio State. And all of us sophomores and juniors on that team saw the seniors. And we saw the look in their eye that there was some payback there. We felt obligated to them because of what they had gone through the year before.
And as we came out on the field, it was almost like the electricity in the air, and you say to yourself, boy, something's going to happen today. And sure enough, you know, you could just start to feel, you know, the momentum build.
25, 30, breaks a tackle for 35, over the 40, and finally brought down at the Ohio State 44-yard line by Marty Huff and Dana Coyne. Wow.
Ohio State gave us their best shot, and we came back. And at halftime it was 24-12. When the game ended, it was 24-12. Everybody in this stadium, everybody in the country was surprised, except the 110 guys that were involved in Michigan football, because we knew a week before that Ohio State was not going to win that game that Saturday.
I played 13 years in the National Football League. Nothing can come to close to what that game was.
It wasn't one of those, you know, fluke upsets. Maybe it happened, maybe it didn't. No, we beat them head to head, nose to nose. And it was admittedly to Woody his greatest football team. And so, as Woody said to me at a banquet after that, looked down the dais at me and he said, "Damn you, Bo. You will never win a bigger game than that." And you know he was right.
7, 4, 3, 2, 1. They got Schembechler on their shoulders. Listen to the crowd go wild. Michigan upsets Ohio State. Believe it or not, the final score. Ripley couldn't have made it any better than this. Michigan 24, Ohio State 12. And across our network of stations, right through this microphone, our listeners heard old Robert Frost Ufer, his final statement, my final statement in 1969. It'll be my final statement again in 1975, 6 days from now, about 4:30 in the afternoon. It'll go like this. And so, today, November 22nd, no Michigan man will ever forget, because today is the day Ohio came to bury Michigan, all wrapped in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers are read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, the Buckeyes came to bury the Wolverines, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when that game was over, it was someone else instead. 22 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as Ravelli played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away.
Bo's first fall on the sidelines of Michigan Stadium was the 24th for local broadcaster Bob Ufer, a Michigan graduate, record-setting track star, and consummate Wolverine football devotee.
In those days, you know, Michigan football wasn't televised every week, and we had to listen to the radio. And I remember many times washing the car, doing errands with my dad, or cutting the grass, listening to Bob Ufer on the radio.
Isn't this what college football's all about? That's why you're where you are, I'm where I am, and aren't you just loving the devil out of it? God darn it, this is great.
He'd be up here at 10 o'clock. He'd be up at 3 hours before broadcasts, putting the 3x5 cards in the desk, going up the side walls, going over his blocks, going over everything that he had set up for the day.
He was a totally unique broadcaster.
Around the league, the other coaches used to say, "Hey, how about that crazy guy you got to broadcast those games there?" He says, "God, I wish we had a guy like that."
Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Carter hands up. Carter's there. Look at those Wolverines. 95 Wolverines going in the end zone. Carter got the pass. In the end, it's done. Ufer is going out of his mind. I have never seen anything like this in all my 40 years of covering Michigan football.
He'd have the mic off of his glasses, and he'd have the scoring horn, the Schembechler scoring horn. And so when they scored the touchdown, You'd hear the three horns.
And when you walk out of that stadium tomorrow afternoon with victory ringing in your ears, you're going to know that you could have been 12-0 in the season. And better yet, you're going to know down deep because you will have just shown 45 million on TV, along with 100,000 over there, that you are indeed the finest football team in America today.
I think there's thousands and thousands of people out there that he attracted to University of Michigan football because he was exciting to listen to.
He broadcast like he felt. He was that emotional about Michigan football.
And I want to ask you two questions. Number one, down deep in your heart, what school has the finest football tradition in the country today? And the second question, who's the number one football coach in the country today?
October 16th, 1981. They're playing Iowa.
He knew he was dying of cancer, and he gave his farewell.
Here's a guy 10 days from passing away. And you have 101,000 people looking up at Dad on the microphone.
Bob lived and died in Michigan, blood blue, and good man, good man.
What did he call?
Like Bob Ufer's voice crackling over the radio waves, Bo Schembechler's Michigan football legacy would be unparalleled. 194 wins, 13 Big Ten championships, 10 Rose Bowls. From 1969 through 1989, Bo won more games than any other coach to pace the sidelines of the stadium Bob Ufer coined, the hole that Yost dug, Chrysler paid for, Canham carpeted, and Schembechler filled every Saturday in the fall.
Those who stay will be champions. I don't think there's a football player that played for me in 21 years that didn't win a championship and go to the Rose Bowl.
Bo was bigger than life because of how he built the tradition on and continued it on from the Yost and the Chryslers.
Greatest football coach I ever had in this world was Bo Schembechler. He made me a better football player, a better person.
Bo was a man who represented everything that the game of football should be. He stood for integrity. He stood for doing things the right way.
As they say about Fielding H. Yost and what he did to form Michigan and the Michigan tradition, Bo, I want to say, bled into that. He became a part of that whole Michigan lore.
You have asked me, and I accept. Yes. Yes. To lead the champions of the West. The greatest college fight song ever written. The victors. 1, 2, 3. Hail to the victors, valiant. Hail to the conquering heroes. Hail, hail to Michigan, the leaders and best. Hail to the victors, valiant. Hail to the conquering heroes. Hail, hail to Michigan, the champions of the West.
We had a lot of wonderful things happen to us, big games that we won, championships that we won, Rose Bowls. And then we had some tremendous disappointments. But the bottom line was, for 21 years, I was the head coach here. And I had a tremendous experience because I'm kind of a funny guy because I like football players and I like to coach football. and I like to be around coaches. I like staff meetings. I love practices, all of those things. It was very difficult for me to give all that up, but I wouldn't change a thing.
The standard around Michigan is whenever a coach leaves, Bo calls me up and he says, "Hey, John, such and so's locker, clean it out." So when I found out Bo was leaving, I cleaned his locker out, took his name off. That afternoon, he came down to work out. No locker, no name, no shoes, nothing. He called me up and he began to rip me so hard, and I finally said, wait a minute. The understanding is here that you've left Michigan now. And he said, what do you mean I left? I've been here now. What the heck? I need a locker. And I said, sir, understand one thing. They come and they go, Hobbs. They come and they go. But that's exactly the way it is here at Michigan. They come and they go.
I think you have to keep reminding the new generations about your great tradition. You'd go up to a kid in the stadium today and he never heard of Fielding H. Yost or Fritz Kreisler. But you have to keep reminding people.
You know, it's something you want to pass on, and I think that's part of the whole tradition. You know, it's been passed on from generation to generation to generation.
There's so many things that go back, and each individual who has watched games in that stadium has their own personal memories of what happened.
Charles Woodson returning that punt against Ohio State. Desmond, the catch against Notre Dame. When that ball was thrown, there's no way Desmond Howard makes that catch. Somehow, some way. Whether it was Yost or Oosterbaan or somebody came up out of that field and just got Desmond the extra 2 inches he needed laid out parallel to the ground to make that catch to win that game.
See, professional football can't match that. They don't have the great rivalries, the great tradition. They don't have that. The bands, the fight songs, the tailgates, coming on the campus, that's all part of it.
Michigan Football Memories is a co-production of Michigan Television and HKO Media.